Welcome to Alpha Wolf Capital. I'm Tim, and I want to personally thank you for stopping by. This channel is designed to help small companies, both public and private, gain exposure with potential consumers, investors, even partners. Take, for example, today's guest, CEO Joe Harary from Research Frontiers, Inc. Research Frontiers is revolutionizing the way the world experiences glass. Their patented SPD Smartglass technology lets you instantly control light, enhance comfort, and transform environments with electronically dimmable glass products. Instant light control at your fingertips. Their patented SPD Smart Glass empowers users to precisely control daylight, reduce harsh glare, and reject up to 95% of heat, all with the touch of a button or through automated sensors. SPD equipped electronically dimmable windows, skylights, sunroofs, and more provide enhanced comfort, efficiency, and aesthetics across many industries while maintaining views and blocking out 99% of UV rays. This is an impact company. They have a report that shows that they can reduce building temperature by 18 degrees. Imagine if we been using this film on all the windows of all the buildings that we've built since 1965, because that's how long this company has been in business. How much energy could we have conserved over that time period? I'm going to let Joe tell you more about that in just a minute. This is not to be taken as investment advice. I am not a certified financial planner. This is for education and entertainment purposes only. I encourage everyone to do their own due diligence.
Here we are inside a factory installed option for Mercedes in the S-Class. It's a SPD Smartglass roof. And if I press a button, it instantly changes from dark to clear. And back again.
Imagine if we had this technology in every home, building, hotel, where you walk in, the room is blacked out just like that. But a $2 sensor picks you up and clears out the window so that you can see the view. When you leave the room and there is no movement detected, what will the window do? It will black out again. How's that for energy conservation? And why don't all our buildings have this technology? How much energy consumption would we have been able to reduce by using this smart glass? Imagine driving your car and you turn the corner right into the sun, and it darkens your windshield, a third of it, within a second. Doesn't that make sense to you? Hey everybody, Tim from Alpha Wolf Capital coming at you with a brand new company, brand new interview, and this is actually a company that I looked into. I want to say easily probably 10 years ago. I'm fully aware of this company. Never met anybody from management, but was very intrigued with their product. And the name of the company is Research Frontiers Inc. Ticker symbol is REFR, reefer, not to be confused with marijuana. Has nothing to do with that at all. I've got Joe Harary here from Joe. You are the CEO of Research in Frontier, right? How long you been with them?
Well, Tim, I started with Research Frontiers in 1986 when I was a junior lawyer on the team that took it public. And in 1992, I joined the company as a part-time general counsel. The chairman, Bob Sachs, may rest in peace, had asked me to work part-time there and have my law firm the rest of the time. My wife and I cashed in all of our frequent flyer miles, flew to Hawaii, sat on a hammock and stared at the ocean, came back and decided that we were going to take Bob Sachs up on his offer. And he gave me every caveat and reason not to do this. He said, Joe, we're a small company. We only have 2 licensees at the time. Now we have several dozen, by the way, and they're all huge companies. But, and there's no guarantee that this is going to be successful. But I trusted him because he was the one client I never had to tone down in his public statements. When he said something, he had 6 ways to Sunday to prove it, scientifically, business-wise, et cetera. So I knew he was an ethical person, and he was a smart guy. He had a MBA from Harvard and also a degree in physics from Harvard. And how he got started, he was a security analyst on Wall Street at what was Kuhn Loeb and Company at the time, and they sent him out to look at smart glass technologies in the early 60s. And the company they sent them to investigate, he said, they really don't have anything. But in the course of his analysis, he ran across some work that Edwin Land from Polaroid had done. And Edwin Land invented the first suspended particle device, or SPD, which is what we call our technology, device. He called it a light valve because just like a water valve will control the flow of water, this could control the flow of light. But Edwin Land, as smart as he was, couldn't get it to work. And he tried and he tried and he tried. And kind of in a funny full circle story, years later, we got it to work when we started Research Frontiers and put in a very sustained and focused development effort in about $125 million. We got it to work, and Polaroid became a licensee. So the technology came full circle back around, and something that someone as smart as Edwin Land couldn't get to work, Bob Sachs could. And I said, Bob, how do you do this? He said, Joe, you got to think like a molecule. So, and by the way, that's what he did. He was brilliant in that he looked at the structure of the materials that Edwin Land was using. And he said, well, if I could put a carbon atom here and an ionic bond here, I could get this to be much better. And then he figured out how to do that. And then he did it.
Unbelievable. So when we're talking about this, you and I, we were talking before we hopped on. This technology has been around, really since, what did you say, 1935?
Oh, I could even go back further. Dr. Herapath in England had a dog with an upset stomach, and you and I are both dog lovers, Tim. This dog had an upset stomach, so they fed him quinine bisulfate. And quinine was what was used back then in the 1850s to calm the stomach. And the dog urinated in a tray of iodine somehow. And these scientists came into the lab, they saw this, and rather than hitting the dog, they put the crystals that had formed in the tray under a microscope, and they saw that they were really, really good light polarizers, these crystals. And they wrote up the experiment and nothing really happened. And then Edwin Land, flash forward to 1934, was looking for a cheap polarizing material for sunglasses. Because back then they used fairly expensive materials like tourmaline, semi-precious, jewel stones to polarize light. And he came across this experiment that Dr. Herapath had done and duplicated it using a dog, believe it or not. And I kind of kid people in the beginning that had we not come up with a synthetic way of doing this, we probably would have had elephants in the lab when we got into mass production urinating. But we've fortunately figured out how to do this artificially. But Edwin Land then discovered the next part of this equation, which was if you apply an electric field to these particles, they will line up and allow light to pass through. And he called it a light valve, but he couldn't get it to work. It very quickly degraded into, a mush, if you will.
Okay.
Think of Edison's light bulbs, how many of them burnt out before he got one
Absolutely.
that lasted, right? Same thing here. Edwin Land couldn't get it to work. But through determination and some very smart scientists, we were able to get it to work. And we realized that we're good at some things, but not at everything. We weren't going to be able to manufacture this as well as some of the large glass companies and chemical companies in the world. So we established a licensing business model where we would license the technology to these companies and let them do the heavy lifting. let them build the factories, let them use their sales force to go out and talk to their existing customers. And also, we weren't so arrogant. We knew that in markets like automotive, we're in 5 different markets, but automotive is our biggest. In those markets, if you're Mercedes or Cadillac, you're going to feel more comfortable dealing with the companies that are already supplying you with glass.
Right.
So we licensed the who's who of the glass industry. So we had at one point the number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5 glass companies in the world, all licensed to use our technology. So when Mercedes wanted to put this in their cars, 2 of them, their 2 top suppliers of glass, were already licensees. They just called them up and said, we want you to supply us with this new thing called SPD, or suspended particle device smart glass. And the rest is history.
And that was in
2010, they floated the idea at the first trade show, and they told me that if this was going to get positive results, they hope to put this in series production in 2011. Now, what I learned after that is that they've spent over 5 million euros validating our technology and 5 years of testing. And some of the people actually did their PhD thesis on SPD. So they were very serious about making sure that whatever they put in the car was good. And their motto was the best or nothing. And we were the best smart glass technology on the planet. We still are, and the best selling. So they launched this in the SLK Roadster in 2011. It was very successful. They didn't know how this was going to work out because the SLK was a small car, $45,000 or 45,000 euros. And this was a fairly expensive $2,500 option at the time. And they didn't know if this option was going to sell or not. It sold multiples of what their expected take rate was for this. So then they put it in the SL Roadster, which was the $100,000 big brother the next year. And then after that, that was very successful, and the take rates were off the chart from what they expected. So they started to put it in their flagship, the S-Class Coupe, the Maybach, the S550, the S450. And around that time, McLaren started putting this in their cars. And then after McLaren, Cadillac approached us and wanted to put it in their new Celestiq, which yesterday was the first day that it was delivered to customers, but the glass has been produced already, for that car in anticipation of this. And then Ferrari. So we kind of have this really long list and growing list because we have a lot of other companies in the pipeline. Just today, I actually met with one of them to get SPD Smartglass incorporated into their vehicles. So along the way, you had this really aggressive, intensive testing program by Mercedes. And that gave us the credibility to make it into other cars and other markets, like the aircraft market, the yacht and cruise ship market, and now the architectural market. So we're basically in all these different markets now.
So that's that you just nailed. So when I looked into this company, it was such a no-brainer to me. I just thought to myself, from an energy conservation standpoint, maybe let me back up. Maybe you should explain what the benefits. It's not just that you can shade out the sun. You're blocking out the UV rays and you're controlling temperature.
Right. So when Mercedes first put a small sunroof in the SLK, it was about a half a square meter. They did a lot of testing. And by the way, the way they tested this car for durability will blow your mind. I mentioned they did 5 years of testing.
Yeah.
They did an endless summer test where they took this car into every hot climate in the world. Just like the movie The Endless Summer, the surfers would follow the waves around the world. They were following the sun around the world, from the deserts of Dubai to Laredo, Texas, to Death Valley, pretty much everywhere where it's really, really, really hot and really, really, really hostile. And they did the same thing on the cold end. They tested this in the Arctic Circle. Okay. And they've admitted that these conditions just don't exist on Earth, but our customers have to have a car that works. And, the postscript on this is there are tens of thousands of cars on the road today with our glass in the roof. And the roof is the hardest part, by the way, of a car to withstand the heat. And there hasn't been one reported problem ever. Now, I wish I could say that about other things in my car, but the glass is really, really robust and good. And that helped us get into all these other markets too. But they, they really, really kicked the tires hard. And being Mercedes, they also kicked the supply chain pretty hard. And that was really good for us as a company because all of our licensees had to rise to the occasion and come out with a world-class product, and they did. And along the way, we became the industry standard, the gold standard, if you will, for smart glass. And there's other stuff that is trying to do what we do or have tried and failed to do what we did. But, we just stuck to our knitting and, we had blinders on. We wanted to make Mercedes happy, and we did. And after that, we made everyone else happy.
So I asked you before we jumped on, I asked you, would you credit Mercedes for being the ones to really kind of kick you guys off, right? I mean, here's a company that's been around since 1964. I mean, this is the thing that drives me absolutely bonkers, is that we have had a technology that if it was being implemented into the buildings and the vehicles since 1964, our energy consumption wouldn't be nearly where it is today.
Clearly.
I mean, there are a lot of things that we could have avoided that we didn't because we didn't have the adoption of your technology.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a philosophy, which we talked about, make the world a better place than it was when you came into it. And if you keep doing that, the world will constantly improve. And we had a mission to make the world more energy efficient, more comfortable, more safe. There's safety aspects of this, especially in automotive. Okay, where you could.
Can you just a temperature inside a car? I live in Vegas.
Okay, let me give you an example. So you leave your car parked outside on the street in Las Vegas for 2 hours, and you come back in, it is very, very hot.
Yes.
And to the point where, and I grew up in Florida where same thing happened. You'd go to the beach with your friends, you'd come back and you couldn't sit in your car. So what the car makers do is they overpower the air conditioner by a factor of 5x. So that you'll be comfortable maybe within the first 5 minutes of getting in your car and blasting the air conditioner.
Right.
Well, now imagine you got in the car and instead of the car being 90 degrees, it's 72 degrees. Well, that's what Mercedes test results show our glass did, is it reduced the temperature inside the car by 18 degrees Fahrenheit. So without using the air conditioner, just having the car sitting there, not using any power, we've now reduced the temperature inside the car by 18 degrees. That means your air conditioning compressors could be 40% smaller. You have less weight to bring around because they're smaller. You have more room inside the vehicle. And you're using the air conditioner a lot less. So what does that mean? Let me put some numbers on that one. So in an internal combustion engine car, ICE car, you have an increase in the driving range of 5.5% because you're using the air conditioner less.
Yep.
And you're reducing CO2 emissions by 4 grams per kilometer. Now, if you don't know what that means, I'll tell you. In Europe, there's a standard that came out that requires car makers to pay a penalty of 95 euros per gram per kilometer that their cars do not meet the emissions standards. And they've tried everything. First, they were trying diesel, but then you had the Dieselgate scandal, so they abandoned that. The glass will save 4 grams per kilometer. That's huge, okay? it increases the driving range by 5.5%, so you're getting better gas mileage. Now move to an electric vehicle world. Okay, two things. Number one, you can increase the driving range of the electric vehicle also by about 5.5%, which is huge. I mean, they really try to increase the driving range by hook or by crook to get these cars to go further. But also, if you think about it, you're sitting on a bank of batteries in an electric vehicle that are underneath your feet. So headroom becomes very, very important to you. So now let me flash back to 2010. The guy that developed this for Mercedes developed pretty much every iconic car that they made from the S-Class on down. But he was a very tall person, much taller than me. And he really was sensitive to the fact there wasn't a lot of headroom. And he was looking to get a couple extra inches of headroom. But if you put a pull across shade like you shade most sunroofs, you wouldn't be able to do that.
Right.
So he needed something that would eliminate the shade of the car to increase the headroom. That's where we came in. We were a couple extra inches of headroom. That also translated into all those other benefits I mentioned. Lower CO2 emissions, increased driving range, better comfort, okay? All of these things, and better stability in the car. Because if you raise the center of gravity of the car by raising the roof up higher, you're going to decrease stability. So by keeping as low a profile, you can actually increase the stability of the car on the road. Now, who would have thought that glass would have done this? Smart glass that happened to change tint. But these are all the benefits that happened out of that.
See, that to me is that's the key right there, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by if we would have implemented this right out of the chute, right? Now I guess the issue could have been the cost, because the costs are higher when you don't have a lot of production, right?
Right. You have to come up the economies of scale. I used to be an economist at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. We looked at economies of scale all the time. I learned two things, that and you can't predict micro trends, but you can predict macro trends. And the macro trend is my friend. So I looked at major macro trends: energy efficiency, move towards electrification, higher energy costs, better safety in cars. And maybe the best thing I could say is, and this is not my thought, this was the leading glass consultant in the world who did the building envelope consulting work for pretty much every skyscraper that's gone up over the last 25 years. He said to a panel where he was introducing the idea of smart glass, and it was not just our smart glass, but all smart glass. But I think he had a special place in his heart for ours, because when it came time to put the glass in his office, he put ours in his office. Okay. But he said, when it's hot out, you take off your jacket. And when it's cold, you put it back on. Why can't your building envelope do the same thing? Why can't it work symbiotically with your windows, your air conditioning, your mechanical rooms? So you're in Vegas, you don't have this problem. You have hot weather 12 months, 11 months out of the year, maybe 10.
It's not that bad, man.
Right. We have the opposite. In New York, you have 2 months out of the year where it's unbearably hot, happens to be now. Okay. So you design your buildings for those times, and you design your mechanical rooms for those times, and you design your equipment for those times. Okay. So what happens is your building has oversized mechanical rooms. That means less rentable space for the landlord. Okay. It also means that for 10 months out of the year, your equipment is working at suboptimal efficiency.
Right.
Because they want, July and August, they want you to be cool.
Yep.
Okay. In the wintertime, you have the opposite. You want to bring daylighting into a structure, but if you put a heavy window tint on a building, you're not doing that. So now imagine we change the way these things are thought about, where our glass, and this is not theoretical, our glass can go 20 times darker than the darkest window tint you ever see on a building to 5 times clearer or anything in between.
And
And we
how
do it in
fast of a time?
1 to 2 seconds. So there's other technologies that can do the same thing, maybe not with the same range, but they could switch from clear to somewhat tinted. And it would take them on a typical architectural size window, 40 minutes. So you flip the switch and 40 minutes later it adjusts. We're doing this in 1 to 2 seconds.
So when you and I first talked, you gave me an example of something that makes so much sense to me that I cannot believe that it isn't in every single car. And that is the visor, the third of a window, your windshield.
Yeah.
I hate those stupid visors that never block all the sun and are in your way because you
Right.
can't see through them. So they're really pretty much useless. I mean, they
Pretty
used to
much. And
only-
if you're tall or short, they're really useless because they're not designed for anybody unless you're a certain height. Bob Sachs and I, he lived in Manhattan, so we would drive at the end of the day west into the sunset. And we always were talking about the sun visor as being the killer app because you have this problem, as you perfectly articulated, Tim, of they don't really work well. Now we're going to change the dynamic on that to do what Jim Morrison from the Doors said: keep your eyes on the road and your hands on the wheel.
hands upon the wheel.
You don't have to touch anything. You can hook up these sun visors to a photocell. So as soon as you turn into the sun, boom, they go dark. As soon as you turn away from the sun, boom, they go clear. Or a tunnel. You drive through a tunnel, right?
Exactly.
All of a sudden, all your windows in your car clear up. You're inside a dark tunnel. But the second, maybe a half a second after you leave, all the glass goes dark. Now, if you don't believe me, go on our website, go to our YouTube channel. You will see a car that's completely outfitted with SPD Smartglass that Continental Automotive did this video. And it's incredible because it shows all of that. It shows going into a tunnel and having it automatically lighten up. And as soon as the driver comes out of the tunnel, dark. Sun visors with multi-segment adjustment. So if the sun is high on the horizon, only the top third of the sun visor may darken. So you're not blocking the rest of your windshield. If it detects that the sun's a little bit lower on the horizon, maybe the top 2 of the 3 segments will darken. I'll share with you a comment made by an automotive engineer. So they asked us to actually embed the sun visor inside the glass. And we did it. It's not, we could do that. It's easy. And it had a 3-segmented sun visor, and we pulled it out of the crate, and they sent their whole team of engineers over to see this thing in operation. And they're videoing it, and they have their iPhones out, and they're taking pictures of it and things like that. And then we flipped the switch. And I'm gonna clean this up a little bit, but and I have this on audio from the video. Oh my freaking God, was the reaction. So it works. It works. So why is it taking so long? Well, there's a lot of noise out there. There's different technologies that are all trying to do what we do. And they're all promising everything, including lower costs and things like that. Nobody has actually come up with a non-subsidized lower cost than we have. Okay, we don't subsidize anything. Our licensees are in this to make money, and the technology is really good.
And by every right, you deserve to make money.
And our licensees have built meaningful businesses, and they've made meaningful investments in doing this, as have we. But we always wanted this to be economically viable. And I think the mistake that a lot of our competitors have made is they think that they will buy market share by heavily subsidizing the market. And if their technology allowed for that, maybe that's a viable approach, but it wasn't. You know, one company that went bankrupt last year, they had such poor yields and such poor economies of scale, and they were throwing away so much glass that subsidizing and doing bigger projects just dug them a deeper and deeper hole. And you know, they say when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. Well, they didn't, and they went bankrupt. So
So, Joe, I am looking at this thing and I'm saying, okay, I live in Vegas. All the casinos are glass. I mean, every one of them are
right.
glass, right? Uh, I look at I look at the cars. The visor thing is such. I don't know why every vehicle does not just have your smart glass as a visor.
Oh, we'll just add the word yet to that. Okay.
Okay.
The cost has come down a lot since we started, and it's coming down even further as more and more cars adopt it. So, so it will get there even in the cost sensitive areas of the market. Right now it's mostly in although the first car was an exception. It was a $45,000 car that was able to sell, you know, a $2,500 option. Now it's a lot less expensive for the car makers to put this in, and they could put it in more and more vehicles. And you know, we have things in the works for all different levels of vehicles. Getting to Vegas for a minute. So imagine I'm staying in one of the casinos,
Okay.
and you look on the outside, it's mirrored glass. Think of the Venetian as gold glass, I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You could do that easily with our technology. From the outside, you wouldn't know which glass was smart and which one wasn't. From the inside, you have so much heat coming in. So imagine I left my hotel room to go out to a conference or to go gamble or to go see a show. The windows in my office have proximity sensors, motion detectors. When I go up to the window, it clears up. It's almost like it's reading my mind saying, Joe wants to look out of his window. And when I walk away, it darkens again. And you could set the interval on how long it takes to darken. It looks like it's magic. It looks like it's reading my mind. It's not. It's just simply putting a motion detector onto our glass. Very
Got
easy
it.
to do, right? I think it's a $2 item, right? So imagine now in a hotel where I leave my hotel room for the day, how much air conditioning they would save, especially in Vegas, if, excuse me, if after I left the room, an occupancy sensor said there's nobody in the room and darkens the glass. And then Joe comes in after lunch, maybe it clears it up so I can look out at the beautiful Bellagio fountains dancing or something, and then boom, it goes back to being dark. You're going to save a lot of energy that way. Also, how often do you think they clean the vertical blinds in these hotels?
I have no idea.
One word, never. So, you know, so, and then how often do you think that the mechanized motorized shades break? One
Oh,
word,
Jesus.
always, right?
Always. Right.
So now imagine where you have a window where it does both of those things. It doesn't break. There's no moving parts. We've done, it must be about 100 million on-off cycles by now
So
on
you know
some of
what?
our tests.
Joe, I got to bring this up to you because I literally just went and watched F1, the movie.
Yeah,
And I don't know if you know, since we have F1 come to Vegas, right? The walkways over, so in order to keep the pedestrians from that didn't pay to see F1 from seeing
yeah.
F1, they're literally like coating the bridges, that glass.
So you can't look through it. I love it. I love it. Imagine flipping a switch when the F1's in town and, or, you know, for other reasons, you know.
Right. I, you need to have somebody because I think literally it's a mess. It's a mess. They are like all these walkover bridges over Las Vegas Boulevard have this glass that they're putting stuff on so that during that time period people can't see, right?
Yeah.
that is like a no-brainer in my
Yeah.
head. All right.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that like that are not immediately obvious, but then when you think about it and see it become very obvious as good uses for SPD Smartglass. And you said we should have people going out and pitching this. Well, we do, and fortunately, our business model is such that we license our technology. We have about 250 patents worldwide, and we license it to the who's who of the glass and chemical and automotive and aircraft industry. And, you know, you can throw a stick at almost any major name and somewhere they've been using SPD Smart Glass for something. But it's our licensees too that are beating the bushes, because they have built factories and businesses, and they have sales forces throughout the world that are out there paying calls on architects, paying calls on the automakers, explaining to the automotive engineers what the benefits are. I do that too. I did it today with a major, OEM, new OEM that was needed to be updated on where things were. And I explained to them, this is not science fiction. This is
Real.
stuff we've done now.
Yeah. This is what kills me, man. This is what I try to convey to everybody about the stock market and the ability to be part owner of a company that literally changes the world for the better. Right. And if I think we spend a lot of time, I just look at the two political parties. And I want to make everybody understand, I don't like any politicians. I just don't like. Look,
You certainly wouldn't hire them for your business.
I like logic. I like common sense. I like smart. I like this is better for the environment. Makes sense. I like logic. That's what I like. So when I see a company like this that's been around since 1965, and it took till 2010 to really have this thing start to kick, right? And I mean, your glass, the roofs, you can have it in quadrants. We were talking about that.
Yeah.
I mean, the kids are in the back, they're watching, a movie. They got that thing black as black as
Exactly.
me, right? I'm in the front seat driving, and I want to stay awake. I got the sun blasting down on me, right?
Yeah.
So, how cool is that, right? It's just this exists. This is not the Jetsons. This is real, right?
Yeah.
And there are real tangible benefits to this, and nobody knows about it. Nobody talks about it. Consumers have power. They really do. If because you look, when they get behind something, look at Apple, right? Look at Starbucks. I mean, $8 cup of coffee. Let's all go to Starbucks. Great idea.
Yeah.
I mean, when we focus on something, Reddit, I think, proved with AMC and GameStop, which are two not great company, not model. I mean, look, those models are broken, but they proved that there is strength in numbers.
Clearly,
Right.
and if you think about where I think a lot of companies make their mistakes, it's taking inappropriate shortcuts. There's a lot of roadkill on the side of the road of the smart glass industry from companies that took inappropriate shortcuts. And the other mistake I think that people make is they make the assumption that something is something that it isn't, or vice versa. And we have a lot of noise in the market because there's a lot of wannabes that want to be in the smart glass space. And a lot of it is hype. A lot of it is things that will work on a very, very small scale in a lab. And I remember when we were in a lab, and there's a huge difference between that and being in the real world. And the thing that bothers me, Tim, you mentioned the frustration of if we did this in the 60s, how much better off would we be? There's so many things that I've seen happen in large corporate America where stupid decisions are made routinely every day, but they get away with it. And there's so many things that could exist that don't exist because of that. And the difference often is somebody determined enough to overcome that inertia of the middle manager, where it's easier to say no to something and keep your job for 5 years than say yes to something and lose it in 3. But your company may not be around in 5 years if you don't innovate. So that's the problem, where you end up at the same result.
You just nailed it.
Yeah. So yeah, we have a lot of patents. Okay, as a licensing company, that's important. But the real secret to our success is smart determination. I spend 150th of what my competitors spend, and I have more to show for it. Trying to be smart, especially when it's shareholder money. I fly economy, it's shareholder money, not when I'm on my own personal vacation, assuming I took one, but for business, I fly economy, it's the shareholders' money. For marketing, for manufacturing, for all of the things that go into a business, you want to get as much bang for the buck as you can, right? And you can if you are willing to do the homework and think through these things and come up with solutions that are not, my son is in venture capital. He tells me, you could predict Facebook's revenues pretty much to the dollar every quarter. I said, how do you do that? He says, what you do is you go on Crunchbase and you see how much venture capital was raised in that quarter. And every business plan of every startup in Silicon Valley is you take 40% of your money and you throw it into Facebook ads. So now we know what Facebook's revenues are going to be because she got the leading indicator, Crunchbase. These are brain dead approaches. They'll work for some people. Sometimes they work really well. And sometimes they're just peeing money down a hole. So you always try to be efficient in what you do. And having determination to succeed, I think, was one of our strong suits, And Bob Sachs, our founder, said, the difference between spending 30 years doing something, if you're successful, you're a persistent genius. If you're not successful, you're a stubborn crackpot. Well, I think history has shown with Mercedes and McLaren and Cadillac and Ferrari and Boeing and Airbus and the yachts and the architectural applications, that Bob Sachs was a persistent genius, not a stubborn crackpot. It was that determination that and that culture that was imbued in this company that if you can't do something, it doesn't mean it can't be done. It just means you haven't figured out yet how to do it. And that's been something that I think has been a mantra around here, and why we were able to succeed where the experts said we would never be able to do this.
Listen, you're fortunate, because I look at companies today that are tackling huge problems that nobody knows about them. I mean, literally, you're not going to see them on CNBC. You're not going to see them on Bloomberg because they're too small. They're just little tiny companies that built it and thought they would come. And that's Field of Dreams. That's a movie. That's not reality, right? Reality is you build it, you think everybody's going to come because it makes so much sense, and nobody comes. And then it's like, literally, it's painful to try and get people to understand why this is so important and why it could make such a huge difference in the world. And people are so myopically focused on their personal lives and their political parties and all this other stupid shit. And I'm sorry to say it that way, but it is stupid shit.
Yeah, usually the word shit goes after stupid. I learned that in second grade.
Right?
We were diagramming sentences.
It's like we just get so caught up in stuff that just doesn't matter. In 10 years from now, not going to matter. Whatever that protest was, not going to matter.
Yeah.
What matters is stuff like this, where if there was a groundswell movement saying, why are we not putting this on all of our buildings, all of our glass buildings? Why is that not being done? Because it would save energy. I mean, this is such an obvious thing to me. This is something that you could feel good about getting behind and supporting and saying, hey, this is what should be happening. Let's make this happen, right? Have a
Yeah,
groundswell for that.
yeah, yeah.
That to me,
Obviously, let's make it happen needs to have two other conditions, which was a solution that works, has to be practical, and you have to have a team from the receptionist on up that is dedicated to making it work and has the ability to make it work. If you don't have those two things, there's going to be a lot of stuff still sitting on the side of the road, that never makes it into the real world. And that's the tragedy here, is that we can be so much better than we are.
yep.
You need a couple people with guts, a couple people with smarts, and a couple people that are determined to make something happen in a positive way. And you push the other stuff aside. You
Do
push
you know how we bridge the gap between the rich and the poor?
out.
Sam Walton, Walmart, when everybody had got shares of stock, down to the janitor, okay? And when Walmart went public, there were a lot of people that became millionaires and I'm talking just the everyday employee. What happens with Wall Street is when the private equity and the hedge funds get involved, all those programs, like the janitor getting stock, they go away because they try to figure out how to make the company more profitable, right? What's your stock today is priced at a couple, maybe a couple of bucks, right? $1.70 or so.
Yeah,
You could scrape your couch in your car and probably find enough change to buy a couple of shares,
right.
right?
No, it's definitely a very good buy. And what you said about incentivizing people is very important. You want everyone waking up feeling like an owner. And
Yes.
and I used to tell our receptionist, she goes, well, I'd ask her opinion on something. What do you think of this market, or what do you think of that? She goes, Joe, why are you asking me? I'm just a receptionist. I said, first of all, you're not. And number two, you're our director of first impressions. When someone walks into the door,
I love
you're who
that.
they see. You're who they see. Okay. And when you answer the phone, you're who they hear. And you're an extremely important part of that experience that anyone contacting our company has. So of course you're going to get stock options. Everybody at my company gets stock options. I even wrote an article for Inc. magazine years ago, which to me was common sense, but to them, they thought it was startling. It's called Stock Options for All.
You and I get it, Joe. I wish the rest of Wall Street got it, because I think Wall Street is really, really screwed up now with the algorithmic trading and the, naked short selling. And I mean, they make it so difficult for small companies to succeed.
It's as if you walked into one of the casinos near you and there was no regulatory environment to prevent a crooked casino from existing.
Yeah.
Right. That's what the market can be like. It's a crooked casino. And I remember years ago, we had a fairly notorious short seller attacking our company. And I went to the SEC, the NASDAQ. When they started threatening my family, I went to the FBI. But I said, there's something called naked shorting going on. They said, oh, no, there's no naked shorting going on.
It's just bullshit.
Yeah, unfortunately, one of the biggest profitable areas for brokerage firms is lending out my stock without my knowledge and making money on it. And
Yep.
it's against my interest because I want my stock to go up, not down. So, I don't keep it in a margin account, you don't do these things to allow them to make money on it and go against your interest, but nobody knows about this stuff. And it's, a little bit of education goes a long way. That's why, Tim, I really love what you're doing, which is educating investors.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
I don't know how
That is
successful
so
I'm being.
important. That is so important because, at some point, you're going to have the fidelity problem where, fidelity became so large, it became the market. So it was very hard for it to outperform the market, right? With all these program trading and things like that, they're going to be having a hard time outperforming, and as economists, when you have these kind of things, the commoditization of something, which is really what these program trading has become, okay, all the profit goes out of it, all the ability to make profit. It becomes a commodity. It becomes something where, you're going to eke along with a very, very modest return. So the only way I know is to step outside that box. But people feel they don't have the tools or the ability to go up against these large brokerage firms and these program trades and these hedge funds that are doing this. And they can't. And if you look at our shareholder base, it's mostly very wealthy, very smart people. A lot of them are scientists and made their money in science-related businesses, but made a lot of money doing it and have huge positions. It's not the institutions that are
And patience.
stock. Yeah.
So something's happening. I feel as though the investor is becoming a thing of the past, right? I mean, everything's about the fast money. And look, Warren Buffett, average holding time 10 years, right? This company has been in existence since 1964.
I bought my
And
first share in 1987.
oh, okay. All right. So
So I've held it for a while.
so I'm sitting here thinking to myself, okay, look how long this is to me a no-brainer technology that should have been being used since 1975, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it literally should have been being used the entire time. We'd be in a very different place if we were using it, right?
Yeah.
So it's taken that's what I mean by the adoption curve, right? I mean, it's I met the guy that actually came up with RFID
Yeah.
20 something years ago. It took that long for it to be adopted. It's just like, I don't know what it is. I mean, look, I'm guilty of it. I held my BlackBerry phone for way too long while everybody else had smartphones, right? I liked my BlackBerry,
Yeah.
but there's a thing to be said about, let's look at what something does. Let's make the case that this is much better than what we're currently doing. And then if this is the one thing that the retail investors have a big advantage in. When it comes to a small cap company, because the funds have gotten so big, 10 billion, 20 billion, 30 billion, and they invest as a percentage of their portfolio, they can't even look at a small cap that's got a 50 or $100 million market cap. They can't. I mean, they just, and a lot of the funds, they can't invest in stocks that are below $5, and they can't invest in stocks that are below $1. That's an advantage to the retail investor, believe
Right.
it or not, because you can get into an amazing company like this that I think could make the world a much better place in several areas, right? Not just one, a lot of areas.
Yeah.
And then you get behind the company and you start asking communities, why are we not doing this? Right? I mean, force it to happen, force it to be used.
There is hope, Tim. There is hope. I'll give you an example. So there's a company that makes construction equipment. And they took what I would consider a non-obvious use of our technology and incorporated it into their construction equipment. What was it? It's a windshield that has a transparent OLED display. But now a transparent OLED, it's just like OLEDs that you have on your TV, except that they're transparent, so you could put them on things like windshields. But the problem is daylighting will wash out the image. So they said, aha, put an SPD film next to the transparent OLED. And when it's too bright out and you're washing out the image, darken the SPD film.
Yes.
And when you want it to be completely clear, lighten the film. And I was at CES and I saw this earth mover, and they had an augmented reality windshield. And it used our technology and transparent OLED technology in combination. And they were superimposing on the windshield where all the gas lines and electrical lines were in this field that the guy was digging. So he doesn't inadvertently cut a gas line, right? So here's a very practical application, increases safety, increases productivity, right? So there's a lot of things that we haven't even begun to scratch the surface on at Research Frontiers.
Joe, you just nailed one of the biggest, so I have been on a company for 5 years that literally identified underground utility location as a problem. There are 400 people that die a year from accidental utility strikes. Okay.
Yeah.
Because the stuff's been in the ground for how long? And we don't know where the hell it is. It's on as-built plans, which are paper somewhere. Who knows, right?
Right.
There's 35 million miles worth of utilities in the United States. 35 million. To put that in perspective, we have 2.6 million miles of paved road. Okay? 35 million miles of utilities, and we don't know where the fuck they are, right? There is a guy that came up with a software system that can identify underground utilities within centimeter accuracy. I have been talking about this company for 5 years. And I just the other day saw another gas line was struck. Somebody died. And I start out, first, I'm sympathetic to whoever lost a loved one. And then I get frustrated because I have been talking about the solution for this for 5 years. And the traction of getting construction, insurance, municipalities, nobody gives a shit. And it's like, I don't get it. The company is struggling because they don't have a massive sales force. They can't do a huge marketing campaign. It's a little company that solved $1 billion problem. It costs this country between 30 and 50 billion a year, plus the deaths.
Yeah.
And I think to myself, why these things don't have to happen. There is a solution.
They don't have to happen. And that's the tragedy here, is that, there's many solutions out there and they have to bubble to the surface. And some companies have the wherewithal to do it and some don't.
And this is where Wall Street is all jacked up, because here's the deal. You get these companies to go public. You tell them they're going to get institutional investors. No, they're not. When they're little, they're getting retail investors, and that's all they're getting, right? And the retail investors are emotional and don't know what they own. And they don't know how the capital markets work, which makes it even worse, right? So you look at this whole thing, this whole system, and NASDAQ just raised the minimum. You used to be able to IPO for $5 million. Now it's 15. Who does that help? Does that help the small company take a risk and uplist? No, you just made it harder for that little company.
Right.
That's what we seem to do. We just seem to keep making it harder for the little guy and more lucrative for the NASDAQ,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's what you did.
We were a $5 million IPO in 1986.
Bingo.
And we didn't need more money than that. And we didn't want to dilute our shareholders more than that. And, we've been very cautious ever since. So now they're creating an adverse incentive, a perverse incentive, so that you have to go to the alternative sources for capital, which are not.
And does that mean you're a better business or you're a better company? No, what it means is you have access to capital.
Yeah.
That's what it means, right?
Right.
Not that you're a better company.
Or it's worth NASDAQ's time to think about you at 15 million, where it's not at 5.
Right. Exactly. And that's what disgusts me, because the small business is the economic engine of this country.
Certainly is. It certainly is.
Microsoft, Nvidia, Apple, Tesla are the next. Microsoft, Nvidia, Apple or Tesla is not going to come from Microsoft, Nvidia, Apple, or Tesla. It's going to be some little company that comes up with something big that people recognize, and that's going to be the next one.
Yeah.
But if we keep making it difficult for the little guy to even get to the field to play
get to the table, yeah.
Right? If we keep making it more difficult, we're not going to have them. They won't come. We're literally being anti-innovation, anti-ingenuity, and at this particular point in time, I think we need to be all of that and more. So
absolutely,
I didn't mean, Joe, this has turned out to be an amazing interview. I mean, I really, truly,
I really enjoyed our discussions. I really do.
Tell me real quickly, how many shares outstanding, fully diluted?
It's about 36 million fully diluted, 33 and a half on a straight basis. No debt.
Zero debt.
Zero debt, cash for the long haul. Very modest expenses. Our burn rate is about $200,000 a quarter. So it's, and one car, one aircraft makes us profitable. So, we're on the cusp of becoming profitable. I've given up on trying to predict publicly. I have my own spreadsheets that show things pretty clearly, but I won't say them publicly because there's always things that can happen between the cup and the lip. And I don't want to be unfair to people by giving them expectations that.
Any need to raise capital at all, Joe?
Not unless it's strategic. I mean, if Mercedes came to me tomorrow and said, Joe, we want to put 20 million into you, I'd figure out how to take 20 million from them. But just to get them a little more pregnant, you know what I mean? But but no, we don't need capital. What we need is what we have is a very loyal shareholder base. We're very, very fortunate to have a very loyal shareholder base that understand what they've bought, and they understand the time frames, and they understand how we're going to get across the finish line in every one of our markets. It's always going to be a different way for each market, but it's the same technology and the same basic approach, and you win a ball game by hitting singles and doubles and triples, not necessarily home runs and grand slams.
What are you most excited about within the next? Do you feel as though you potentially have some catalysts in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah. So what I'm the most excited about, Tim, first of all, is our pipeline. The frustrating part about the pipeline is you can't always talk about it because the customers are trying to do their own thing. I respect that as long as they pay their money, and use our technology. I know that everything else comes along. But I'm very excited about the pipeline. I'm very excited that a lot of the noise that has been out there, even though there's been more and more entrants, a lot of people are realizing that some of these technologies are just not as advertised, and they're not able to deliver what we've been able to deliver reliably. And, we have the credibility, which, through Mercedes and McLaren and, Ferrari and Cadillac and Boeing and Airbus and all of these household names that have entrusted their products to our technology as part of it. And that builds on itself. It builds on itself. And I'm just excited that we have a good team of licensees around the world that are also similarly understanding what they have invested in as licensees and what the potential is for the market and how they can make a lot of money and make the world better by doing this. And
Architecturally, I mean, and we talked about it before we hopped on. You have essentially what you've done is you don't have to replace the windows. You actually have you come out, they measure the window, and you put a window on the inside of the window, right?
yes, and it's like buying carpet. You know, you go to the store, you pick out the color, they come and measure your house, they order it from the mill, it shows up and it's installed and you have new carpet. We now have basically carpetized the smart window market. No one else can do this. And in terms of near-term catalysts, that's probably the biggest one because I know what's coming in automotive, I know what's coming in aircraft, I know what's coming in the marine market. Um, you know, those have longer sales cycles. But if you wanted this in your home this year, you can get it in your home this year. You know, and through a retrofit.
And what would that do to your power bill, right?
We've done some, well, the hardest thing to quantify is what the question you just asked, because every building is
It's
different.
different.
I'll
Yep.
give you a simple example. You have 3 buildings identical in the same block in New York. One houses a retail store, one houses an accounting firm, and one houses a law firm. They're gonna have totally different energy footprints. The law firm, you have people working from 8 AM to midnight.
Yep.
The accounting firm, you have people going in and out a lot, but really not the same hours. And the retail store has its own, traffic patterns, right? So it depends on the use, depends on where the exposure is. Is this in Manhattan? Is it in the UK? Is it in Las Vegas? But what we've seen typically is you could reduce your air conditioning bills by about 20%.
Yep.
Now, I'm saying smart deployment of SPD in the right areas.
Yep.
Now, the other benefits here, you have a nice view. You have a high-rise apartment. Go to any high-rise apartment, you'll see the vertical blinds are completely wide open. They paid a premium for the view. They don't want to block it. Well, now there's a couple hours a day when they either have to close those blinds, which is a little bit of a chore, or they leave them open and suffer. Now change the equation where you could just basically take a remote control. A little key fob like this operates some of the windows in my office and there you go. Or talk to my Amazon Alexa. I better not say it too loud because the window inside will turn on. But I can control my windows with an Amazon Alexa.
Yep.
Or a photocell, have it automatically adjust. There's so many different things you can do here. And it's simple. It's not rocket science. It's not science fiction. It's basically simply interfacing, an intelligent control system of some sort, whether it's a dimmer switch, a smart speaker, a photocell, AI, whatever,
Oh my God. I got
to
huge
to
thoughts
to
going
the
through
to
my
the
head.
window,
Yep.
telling it to darken.
I think this is an exciting company that has been ignored. I can tell you this. I looked at the chart, and so you know, I'm not. I was always a fundamental guy, and I never could understand what the hell is it looking at a chart going to tell me about a stock. And then, like 17 years ago, I took a course in technicals, and now it's the first thing I look at. Right. What I've learned is that price action can actually tell you a lot, and areas where there's congestion, that tells you where supply and demand is, right? So there are things that you can tell from the chart, and I can tell you this. So you just had a massive pop, right? From 90 cents right up to about, I mean, up to 2, and then it came back down. So 2, round numbers are a psychological thing for human beings. So those always have significance when it comes to trading. Uh, but what was the spike from 90 cents up, Joe? What was that?
There's a number of things. Mercedes introduced a vehicle at the Shanghai Motor Show where they were kind of using our technology in a different way than in the past, not just in the sunroofs, but in the side windows and a concept. I think that
Okay.
got people's imagination going as to other uses for the technology. Um, we've had a lot of singles and doubles and triples that once you clear out the person that has to sell their stock to pay for a wedding or whatever it is, you know, creates, positive price action. Ultimately in a company like ours or any small cap or micro cap company, it's not the fundamentals so much that move the company as supply and demand for the stock that will move the stock price. So if somebody's making a wedding and needs to sell something, or has a
Right.
margin call because of something else, right, and has to sell something, right? That can affect us. What we learned to do though is obviously you tell the story as broadly as possible, Tim, and you're a big part of helping us with that. Because I think you have an informed audience that understands what you're telling them and why it's important. But also, we stick to our knitting. We don't get ahead of our skis. We don't, we are out there beating the bush every day. I mean, if I told you my day today, it was constant, you know, meetings with prospective customers for the technology, right?
Yep.
Including major auto companies. Why? Because those seeds that get planted grow, and they grow faster when you have other seeds that are growing around them. And we've had those other seeds. We had good success in each of the markets we've been in. And we're fortunate that we actually have 5 markets to go after, whereas most smart glass companies will pick one. Usually it's architectural, and usually that's a very tough market to break into because it's not predictable.
You have, I think, I mean, as I look at it, I mean, I've always thought, and when I looked at this company years and years ago, architectural was the thing that was just in my head. I just thought you guys, it was a no-brainer home run, right?
Same here, by the way. If you
Huh?
told me that a price sensitive market like automotive was going to be our bread and butter, I would have
You
said
never
you're
would have thought
nuts.
that, right?
Yeah, I would have thought not, you're nuts. But what I learned to do is realize that I don't have a monopoly on the truth here. And if you adjust and are able to build a business model that could adjust. I once gave the analogy about how to build a good company. I said, what you need to do is, and I was lecturing a group of engineering students at a major engineering university, and I was saying, if you can build something that has the resources of an aircraft carrier and the maneuverability of a ski boat, you've built a good company. And then I figured out that's what we did through a licensing model. We have the resources of an aircraft carrier. We have the world's largest glass companies, the largest car companies, the largest chemical companies, the largest material science companies, all involved as licensees. That's the
Yep.
aircraft carrier. But Research Frontier sits at the focal point, at the steering wheel of all this, with the maneuverability of a speedboat. If I need to all of a sudden move from automotive to construction because of this breakthrough we had in the retrofit application, I don't have to spend money to do that. I just need to turn the wheel.
Yep. Yep. I mean, look,
Yeah.
I think the story here is I look at everything from a risk reward, right? Yeah, 90 cents. It was not an accident that it bounced off of there because you had some real congestion in that area. You can see that from the, oh, well, actually, you can't see it because I have a green line, and because I have green screen, you actually can't see the line. So that's, let me change the color of that line real quick. Um, doo, doo, doo. Let's see. Okay. So if, let's go with a blue. There we go. And then I'll change one more. Okay. So if you look at the 90 cent area, that isn't an accident that it found support there, because you can go all the way back over here, and that is in 2019. You had support at 90 cents. So isn't it something that it just came down here in 2024 and found support there? And then it came down, and what you just did was you did called the double bottom test. So in other words, you hit the low, which was a previous low back in 2019. You bounced off of it, and then you came back down and you tested it again, and you bounced right off of it again. So that's a double bottom, which is a bullish formation. And then you did something interesting. You broke above the long-term downtrend, which the longer the trend, the more dominant the trend, right? So you have a dominant downtrend from the upper left to the lower right. You actually, and it's tough to break through that, because it's like inertia, right? So when something's got momentum, you have to have something of greater or equal to break that momentum and go the other way. So it's tough to do, right? So you have a long-term trend down. Well, you just broke it. You didn't hold it, but you did pierce it, right? And now you're at this area of about a $1.65, $1.70 that's acting as support. And that is an area of congestion right here. It's acted as support, it's acted as resistance. So that's a little battleground. I have a feeling what I try to do is I try to match up a good looking chart setup with a fundamental story. And because I think your odds of having a home run increase significantly when you match up technicals with fundamentals.
Right, and I think the second half of the year, Tim, when the retrofit starts to, come out, that'll have a meaningful impact on our revenue. That's
So,
predictable. We'll have other meaningful impacts from pipeline things, but that is kind of a sea
so
change.
that's what I try to do. So I've got a chart that is telling me it's trying to break the long-term downtrend. So you were in this trend for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. That's been a downtrend for 5 years, right? You break a 5-year trend, and this is where it's breaking. This could be the beginning of a 5-year uptrend, right? A whole new trend. And that's where you are right now. And you are also there fundamentally, from what you're telling me, because I think this is a very exciting time for research, right? Uh, uh, I don't tell people what to do. I don't tell them to buy. I don't tell them to sell. It's not what I do. I'm not a financial advisor. What I would say though is this: the risk reward here is definitely in the reward favor. I mean, if you go to zero, Joe, are you going to go bankrupt on me in the next year? I mean, you've only been here since
Yeah,
1965.
yeah, right. I don't think we're going anywhere except up,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
and by the way, we're also very, very conservative on fiscally, so we're not going bankrupt.
Okay. So
So
I look at
zero is
this.
out.
My downside risk is maybe I go back down. I test 90 cents. If it did do that, I would back up the truck. That's where I would load up, right? I would start here and start dipping my toe. So, what I would tell people is if you don't, this is the thing. You watch the video, you see this, it sounds good. 2 weeks from now, you forget all about it, and you're back in your everyday life, and you forget about research. Buy it. Buy one share. Buy one share. I could tell people to buy one share, right? Because what happens when you buy one share and you go to their website and you sign up for their email alerts, and you are now invested. You have one share and you will pay attention to what's happening with the company. You will regret that you only have one share if it takes off and goes to 10. But at least you participated, right? It's worse to not participate at all. At least you have one, right? That is what I am starting. That's actually a CEO of another company said that on in one of my interviews. And when he said that, I thought that was the most brilliant thing I think I've heard anybody say, because he's right. I mean, buy one share, see what happens, right? I think you have a fantastic story. There's a lot of history here. There's a lot of stuff we didn't talk about. Hitachi, Mercedes, a lot of stuff, fascinating stuff to me. I love stories like this. And I love the fact that you do something that makes it more comfortable, quality of life, improves quality of life, right? I live in Vegas. I would like to have those windows on my house right now because it is hot as hell.
Yeah. I don't think any company could ever go wrong by doing something that has a societal benefit.
Yeah.
If we can make people's lives better, there will be a market and people will understand what that market is and they will act on it and they will buy it.
Yep. So there may be competitors out there that try to have their claims. This is the real deal. This is a proven company that deserves the support of the consumer, right? That really deserves the support of the, forget the new guys that are trying to come out with bogus claims and all this stuff. Support this company. Simple. And you can feel good about doing that, right?
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at. Joe,
If I could leave your viewers with one thing, go to smartglass.com and look at some of the videos and understand none of this stuff is computer generated. None of this, it'll blow your mind what's possible. It'll inspire you, not just about us, but in general, that people can do things that you didn't think were possible.
Yes. But these shareholders that have been holding and invested in this company, they deserve to be rewarded for their patience, right? And for supporting the company. So I think it's time that you had your time in the sun, right? No pun intended. But I do think that it is a deserving company. So here's what I want to do. This is our first interview. I think it's going to be I think it's an amazing interview. When do we have you back, Joe?
Whenever you want. I enjoy our discussion so much. I really do. So anytime you want, Tim.
Listen,
I learned from listening, so keep talking.
When do you feel as though there could be an event or something that we'd have you back and maybe want to update shareholders on?
Well, I think when the retrofit comes out, which we're saying is the second half of this year, so we're talking,
Weeks.
yeah, well, starting in a week. Yeah. But
Okay.
yeah, I think that
Are you going to be doing any shows? What shows would you be going to? Conventions and stuff like that?
we just got back from the cruise ship design show.
Okay.
In Miami, and that was phenomenal because everybody there that was relevant to our market knew about us, knew about SPD, knew about our licensees, right? And they're able to put a face with the name so that now they know how to get, move things forward, faster, if you will.
Okay.
You have a number of car shows coming up in the fall. In the summer, there's a lot of prep activity, but I think what you're going to see is, we really, work towards the seeds that we've planted, making sure they sprout, making sure they grow, and the new seeds that we're planting now with the retrofit are also something that we're very focused on right now, which I think is going to be huge because it's enormous potential revenue and very visible benefits to the consumer or to the building owner or facility manager.
The builder show is in Vegas.
Yeah, the one, it was in February.
Yeah.
I like going to that. Next time I come, I'll look you up.
Okay. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
CES is always good, so I'll make sure that I see you in January of this coming year too. You'll see me every month in Vegas or something, maybe.
All right, that works for me, Joe. Look, man, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, and
It's a pleasure.
yep, we're gonna have you back. I think probably as soon as I see a headline that I think is really worthy of maybe going beyond the press release, right,
Yeah.
and explaining how important that is to the
Right.
company and what it could
Right.
mean.
And I think people will see good things happen with the company. We have a very easy to understand business model. We license technology, you get a 10 to 15% royalty. We have no debt, we're very conservative, and we're in very big markets and we have other people doing the heavy lifting. So these are the kind of things that, hopefully make me look smarter than I am.
I think you're a pretty smart guy. All right, Joe. Thank you so much for doing this, man. I really appreciate it, and I
Thank
can't
you,
wait to
Tim.
have
I
you back.
enjoyed it.
All right,
Thank
hold
you.
on one second. I'm gonna shut this off. Thank you for tuning in to another CEO interview here at Alpha Wolf Capital. Today we had Joe Harary from Research Frontiers Inc., ticker symbol REFR. I hope you enjoyed today's interview, and if you did, do us a favor, give us a like. How about giving us a share? And while you're at it, make sure you smash that subscribe button. All of those things are extremely important to us here at Alpha Wolf Capital, and we want to thank you for taking the time to do that. Until next time, stay safe. Alpha Wolf Capital wishes you the very best of success.